Detective Alma Reyes would later say a front yard can swallow the right minute and hand back only heat and silence. On the sidewalk off South Lirio Drive, the cicadas droned. Hose water ticked from a sprinkler. Chalk dust floated over hopscotch squares. And under the hall bench sat a child's suitcase with a rusted zipper tooth and a pinhead spot of dried blood on the canvas name tag. June 12th, 1981. Webb County, Texas, until DNA finally spoke and gave the case 3 living names to confirm. But before we dive into this case, I'm curious. What true crime stories have you heard about in your town? And when did they happen? Drop it in the comments below. Let's see how many local mysteries are still out there. Block 1. Route and initial scene. The Navarro triplets, 6 years old, were chalk drawing in the front yard by about 3:10 p.m. A postal carrier cleared the corner box at 3:12 and noted 3 boys of the curb. At 3:18, the mother stepped inside for a phone call. The screen door left to catch on the hook. A neighbor across the way heard the side gate click once at about 3:20, then a quiet settle. By 3:24, a lawn service truck rolled past. The driver logged an empty walkway. At 3:27, the yard was still, chalk untouched, tricycle upright, voices gone. The call to police posted at 3:34. The working window is about 3:18 to 3:27. Minutes, not hours. Yard tableau. Chalk arcs across warm concrete. A plastic pail tipped with 2 bottle caps inside. A red paletta wrapper flattened near the curb. The side gate latch sat down from the inside. No pry or splinter at the post. Inside the hall, under a bench by the door, a small canvas suitcase with an iron-on name patch and a single brown pin speck on the label edge. A technician lifted the suitcase to paper, marked the zipper tooth as fractured from age, and carded a microflake from the label for biology. Perimeter artifacts. Curb, no fresh skid or Excel mark. Sprinkler overspray softening tire traces. Walkway, 3 shoeprint clusters in children's sizes. Toe out, then turned back toward the gate. Gate, latch set from the yard side. Porch, screen door hook seated, no tear at the hinge mesh. Drive, no foreign oil drip in the band. Street, no vehicle plate or make recalled by witnesses within the minutes bracket. Found and not found. Scene density. Found physical. The suitcase with intact label and a pinhead blood flake. Chalk residue patterns. Interior latch set. Tricycle upright. Found context. Postal time at 3:12. Gate click near 3:20. Lawn truck pass at 3:24. Call at 3:34. Not found. No pry, no wide scatter, no loud curbside event, no other children reporting a call or shout. The yard reads brief contact and quiet departure, not a chase. Witness pulse. Mrs. Vega across the street logged the gate sound and a sudden absence of voices. The carrier fixed his 3:12 mark from the route card. The lawn driver underlined a clear walk as he idled past. No one noted a honk, a knock, or a raised adult voice inside the 9-minute band. Surface and illumination. Afternoon glare. Heat shimmer on the street. Hose water ticking from the sprinkler head. Concrete warm with a dull sheen, ideal for dusting. Air held cut grass sweetness. Vinyl tang from the tricycle grips. And a faint mineral smell at the gate post. Immediate response. Patrol taped the front and side approaches, photographed chalk and latch positions, and logged the suitcase, porch latch, and gate hardware. The suitcase moved to paper, sealed with date and initials. The blood microflake on the label was lifted to a swab card and entered cold. Chain of custody remained continuous from house to vault. No unnecessary openings. A neighborhood canvass began before 4 p.m. with door-to-door time marks. Working window. Minutes, not hours. Between the mother's step inside and the lawn truck's pass, about 3:18 to 3:27 allowed for a quiet approach, a short exchange, and a departure without a street signature. Rule of 2. Anchors. Physical. A preserved pinhead blood flake on a child's name label, sealed the day it was found. Context. A documented gate click and converging neighbor and route card times that pin the yard to a 9-minute band. 1 flake of dried blood in 1981, boxed and cold, that would one day light a path to living men under new names. Tape lines, bag numbers, and a tight red pencil brace around 9 minutes on a clipboard. Outside, the sprinkler ticked and cicadas kept their summer drone while the yard went suddenly, absolutely quiet. Block 2. Assumptions versus evidence. Runaway or ordinary drift. What we would expect. Toys scattered along a path. Neighbors catching sight of 3 boys moving together. A call from a park or a corner store. A slow widening of prints. What we have. A tricycle tipped within the yard. 1 sandal under the hibiscus. Chalk suns fixed where they were. And silence inside a 9-minute band. No path outward. Drift does not erase 3 voices at once. Snatch in a vehicle from the curb. What we would expect. A honk, a door slam, a tire chirp, a witness to a plate or a make, a skid or acceleration mark where rubber meets warm concrete. What we have. No curb signature in the band. No remembered engine note. No plate. No color. And sprinkler overspray softening whatever idle trace sat there from earlier. A car may sit, but the street does not record a grab. Forced entry through the gate. What we would expect. Pry or splinter at the post. Latch hardware twisted out. Mesh torn. A scuff line dragging out to the sidewalk. What we have. Latch seeded from the yard side. Catch shiny from recent fingers. Screen mesh intact. Walk clean. The gate reads handled, not broken. Known adult. Quiet approach. What we would expect. No shout. No struggle. A small circle of steps and a turn toward the gate. Objects left as is. A fast settle. What we have. Chalk arcs unblurred. A grape stain cooling on the step. A paper cup ring on wood. And a hinge squeak at about 4:06 followed by stillness after the jingle. A familiar hand can move 3 boys without a street noise to mark it. Sibling split or game gone long. What we would expect. 1 voice calling the others. A loop to a nearby yard. A neighbor report of boys on a side lawn. What we have? A single sandal under the hibiscus and then nothing. The yard reads end state, not a game's next scene. Custody dispute or family assist. What we would expect. Prior filings, phone friction, a relative sighting, a timetable that wobbles for an insider. What we have? Routine errands on paper, the call posted at 4:29 and no relative in the canvas placing a hand on the gate. The band stays tight against ordinary life. Stranger lure with treats. What we would expect? Wrappers dropped along a route, a second stop logged by the truck, a neighbor recalling an adult voice at child height. What we have? The ice cream route card set at about 4:12 to 4:14 and no follow-on loop. No adult voice in the minutes that matter. The jingle brackets time. It does not name a face. Prints and negative trace. What we would expect. Ridge detail at the gate catch and the screen frame. Usable on warm metal or painted wood. What we have? Faint ridge fragments at best. Partial or latent print. A fragment of a fingerprint ridge pattern that can still be enough to match. Present but non-probative in 1981, stored with the rest. Negative space carries weight here. No pry, no drag, no curb rush. False lead, decisive fact. The easy label is abduction by car. The decisive fact set is quiet sequence inside minutes. Latch set from the yard side, chalk undisturbed, no curb mark, no shout, and a vinyl suitcase indoors holding a child's adhesive bandage with a pinhead of dried blood sealed the day it was found. Streets forget quickly. Paper and cold storage do not. Era limits documented. It is 1981. No home cameras on the block, no synchronized digital clocks, no cellular breadcrumbs. Minute marks and sealed items are the spine. Working window? Minutes, not hours. Between the truck rolling at about 4:14 and the sprinkler click at about 4:18, with discovery at 4:26, the bracket remains about 4:14 to 4:22 for approach, quiet contact, and departure without a street signature. Rule of 2, held. Physical, the preserved adhesive bandage with dried blood from the vinyl suitcase. Context, route card time for the jingle and a neighbor's hinge squeak and silence bracketing the minute band. A latch seated from inside and 1 small sealed swab card that would later let the case hear itself. Boxes numbered, times underlined, and 8 narrow minutes boxed in red. Outside, cicadas kept their drone while the grape stain dried to a darker violet on the step. Lock 3. From case file to cold case. Community canvas and timing passes. Detectives walked block edges, porches and the alley run. The postal route card fixed the corner pole at 3:12 p.m. A neighbor logged a single gate click at about 3:20, then a quiet settle. The lawn service driver rolled past at 3:24 and noted an empty walk. The call posted at 3:34. The working window held where it began, about 3:18 to 3:27, minutes, not hours. What actually went into bags and boxes: paper packaging, seals dated and initialed, collected and sealed, the small canvas suitcase with intact iron-on name label, a pinhead blood flake lifted from the label edge to a swab card, gate latch swabs, chalk scrapings from the hopscotch arc, a red paletta wrapper from curb edge, and ridge lifts from the screen door hook. A single sandal from under the hibiscus went into paper and was photographed in place. The suitcase and swab card entered cold storage the same day under one custody number. Chain of custody stayed continuous from front room to vault. What did not give back in 1981? No fixed cameras on the street, no synchronized home timers to print a second mark. Latent work on painted wood and warm metal produced partial ridge fragments without individualization. Serology could type blood but not name it. The pinhead flake on the label was recognized as high value but too small to spend under era chemistry. The gate hardware showed recent handling with no pry or twist that would fix a stranger. Leads that ran and thinned. Patrol mapped the ice cream truck loop and logged the jingle window. Nothing intersected the 9-minute band. Corner stores checked wrappers and registers. Nothing useful. Family and custody angles yielded no active orders, no scheduled pickups. Teachers and after-school volunteers were interviewed. No adult was placed at the gate in the minutes that mattered. Calls about unfamiliar vehicles resolved to ordinary errands outside the band. The yard read quiet approach and departure. There was no ransom call, no follow-up contact, no verified sighting. File drift, steady spine. The paper held the same logic across passes. Latch set from the yard side, chalk arcs unblurred. No curb signature, a suitcase in the hall with one tiny biological trace. The minute bracket remained tight and nameless. Why it cooled, in plain terms. Technique limited. No cameras. Partial prints that did not rise. No second scene that could be tied by pattern. A national DNA path for missing children did not yet exist, and the pinhead flake was preserved rather than consumed. The case moved from active to waiting while the clock stayed exact. Chain of custody and condition on the shelf. Annual audits logged seals intact, labels legible, and freezer temperatures within range. In 1994, the evidence refrigerator was replaced. The cold contents transferred under a single custody line. In 2006, property reboxing added barcodes without extra openings. In 2011, a county state audit tagged the suitcase swab card as biologically viable for modern comparison. The negatives stayed clean throughout. Succession. One set of hands after another. 1981. Patrol and CSU collected, sealed, and vaulted. 1994. Sergeant Hinojosa audited cold storage during equipment change. Integrity noted. 2006. Evidence unit reboxed and barcoded, seals photographed. 2011. District intake flagged the swab card as viable for national comparison when such indexing became available. The box remained closed until laboratory transfer was authorized. Working window, minutes, not hours. The bracket did not move. About 3:18 to 3:27 for a quiet approach, brief contact, and departure without a street signature. Rule of 2, still in place. Physical. A preserved pinhead blood flake on a child's name label, sealed and cold. Context. Converging neighbor and route card times that pin the scene to a 9-minute band. One narrow swab card marked label, suitcase, sat cold for decades while chalk dust dulled in a paper envelope. Audit lines, seal numbers, and a tight red pencil brace around 9 minutes on a clipboard. Outside, sprinklers ticked and cicadas kept their drone while the file went quiet and waited for science to speak. Block 4. Technicals and breakthrough. Why the file moved now? In 2012, the Attorney General's Cold Case Unit triaged the Navarro file and marked it biologically viable. She noted a preserved pinhead blood flake from a child's suitcase label with continuous chain of custody. intact paper packaging, and minute marks tight enough to test timing claims later. A county state memorandum covered transfer, testing scope, and any database use. One custody log followed freezer pulls, repack, and sealed courier to the state lab. Reopen kit under clean protocol. She logged item order, fresh gloves per item, bench swabs before and after, negatives recorded. The swab card labeled suitcase label microflake was photographed, thawed, and split. Gate latch swabs and tricycle grip lifts were retaped for modern chemistry. Every return went back to cold with dated initials. First pass, STR and kin confirmation. qPCR showed sufficient human DNA on the microflake for full workup. STR, short tandem repeats, the standard DNA test that examines short repeating markers like a genetic fingerprint. A single juvenile autosomal STR profile developed from the 1981 flake. With consent, the mother provided a fresh family reference swab in 2012. Kinship statistics reported a parent-child relationship at about 99.98%. The profile and the family reference were indexed in the National Missing Persons Lanes of CODIS, Combined DNA Index System, with audit timestamps. The match turned a rumor into a documented tie. The blood on the suitcase was one of the Navarro boys. Genealogical inference was not needed to prove maternity. It would be needed to find living names. mtDNA and preservation check. mtDNA, mitochondrial DNA, maternal line DNA. Useful when nuclear DNA is degraded or limited. A parallel mitochondrial DNA read reproduced the maternal line and served as a preservation control across decades of storage. Bench blanks and reagent negatives remained clean. Labels and seal photos from 1981, 1994, 2007, and 2011 read back without extra openings. SNP turn for leads, not proof. She authorized a low-input SNP library from the remaining extract to support lead generation. Call rate held in the low 90s. Mixture assessment fit a single juvenile contributor. FGG, Forensic Genetic Genealogy. Investigators compare crime scene DNA to open genealogy databases and build a family tree down to a candidate. Uploads stayed inside opt-in law enforcement portals with a complete audit packet. The SNP signal resolved to a paternal cluster with mid-century roots in South Texas and repeated modern listings near the border counties. The readback narrowed to triads of male siblings, born within weeks of the Navarro triplets, and later recorded under altered surnames. Paper trail and minute filter. Public records and program rosters were scaffolded against the family tree. She mapped residential clusters to youth care entities operating in rural Webb and adjacent counties in the late 1980s and early 1990s. She underlined one site whose staff roles showed 3 adult men of the same age bracket working long-term under consistent but non-birth surnames. Geography and schedules fit the original yard window and later movements. The minute filter stayed where the street had put it, about 3:18 to 3:27 for approach and quiet departure, a choreography consistent with a trusted adult known to the boys, rather than a curbside snatch. Microtrace and scene logic second pass. She reread the suitcase label under polarized light, adhesive residues mapped to era glues used on children's bandages, class only. Gate hardware showed touch without pry. Chalk arcs stayed unblurred. None of these traits named a person. Together, they confirmed the same story the minutes already told. Quiet approach, minimal disturbance, immediate exit. Eliminations and controls. Elimination swabs from family, neighbors, and first responders did not match the juvenile STR. Independent re-extractions reproduced the STR and mtDNA calls. Bench blanks stayed clean. Custody logs remained continuous from 1981 to 2012. Shortlist deliverable. The FGG scaffold and records overlays produced a shortlist of 3 living adult males, same birth window, co-located on a rural program campus south of Laredo and on an affiliated property nearby. The package to investigators included the tree diagram, the audit packet, a residency matrix, and a plan to obtain voluntary buccal swabs to confirm parentage against the mother's reference and the 1981 juvenile STR. lawful confirm, clean and consensual. She underlined procedure, community contact through council or agency leadership, documented consent for buckle collection from each adult, duplicates stored, and comparison run blind at a second lab. Genealogy would remain a lead only. Identification would rest on autosomal STR parentage and mtDNA concordance to the maternal line. Working window, application. The bracket that anchored the scene, about 318 to 327, now served to test narrative claims at interview against a fixed spine. Minutes, not hours. A pinhead flake sealed in 1981 spoke in 2012, and a database answered with a family tie that had waited 3 decades to be written down. Audit lines, clean negatives, and a typed kinship statistic on a lab report. Outside, the same street where chalk once dried sat quiet in the afternoon heat, while science put 3 living names within reach. Block 5. Identification, confirmation, reunion. Voluntary buckles. 3 names to family. Detectives arranged consented buckle swabs from the 3 adult men identified through records overlays. Each collection was photographed in situ, labeled at the chair, sealed in paper with date and initials, and logged under a single custody line. Duplicates moved to a second laboratory for blind confirmation. Chain integrity remained continuous from collection to vault. Autosomal STR, child trace to adults. The 1981 suitcase trace profile was compared to each adult buckle. At all core loci, concordance held with no unexplained dropout. Parent-child likelihood ratios exceeded 10 to the 15th power for each adult against the mother's 2011 reference, supporting first-degree relationships across the set. STR, short tandem repeats, the standard DNA test that examines short repeating markers like a genetic fingerprint. Results reproduced on independent extracts. Negatives stayed clean. mtDNA and sibling structure, concordant lines. mtDNA, mitochondrial DNA, maternal line DNA useful when nuclear DNA is degraded or limited. Maternal haplotype matched among the 1981 trace, the mother, and all 3 adults. Full sibling statistics between the adults were consistent with triplets under the recorded birth window. No paternal reference was required to reach identification. Database path, lead to confirmation. The turning event remained the 2012 National Index hit that linked the 1981 child STR to an adult profile. Genealogy, where used, provided context only. CODIS, Combined DNA Index System, the UL National DNA Database. Identity rested on direct STR comparisons and maternal kinship, not on witness memory. Administrative reconciliation. Names and records. Family Court issued an order recognizing biological parentage, sealing legacy identities, and authorizing amended vital records under current lawful names. The order set contact terms and counseling resources. A victim services liaison logged consent for limited public disclosure. No historical photographs were released. Reunion. Procedure on paper. Moment in a room. On July 19, 2012, at about 3:11 p.m., comparison packets were signed out to family services, and the reunification proceeded in a quiet interview suite. Vent hum steady, overhead fluorescence clean, recorder light red. The case officer read the statistics, then the names. A notary logged acknowledgments. No speeches, no cameras. 3 signatures, 2 parents, 1 file closed to public view. All 3 men were medically cleared and opted for structured contact. All 3 are alive and well under new names. Corroboration. Timeline and minute band unchanged. The yard spine did not move. About 3:18 to 3:27 for approach, brief contact, and quiet departure. What changed was the end point. Biology returned the subjects as living adults, not remains. Rule of 2 held. Physical proof in STR and mtDNA, contextual proof in converging minute marks and intact custody. Integrity. What did and did not happen. No compelled collection. No unnecessary openings. Dual lab confirmation completed. RMP and LR tables filed with the court packet. A parallel inquiry into past caretaking practices proceeded separately and is not part of this identification record. A pinhead blood flake sealed in 1981. 3 voluntary buckles in 2012, and a typed statistic that wrote a family back into existence, seal numbers, locust tables, and a court stamp at 3:11 p.m. Outside, cicadas carried the same summer drone that once filled South Lirio Drive, while DNA finally spoke and returned 3 living names.